You're listening to another ambitious Entrepreneur Network.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
This is Women in Leadership Podcast, featuring success insights from women around the globe. Now, over to your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of Women in Leadership Podcast, brought to you by the Influence Alliance, the business building community for change makers who want to make a much bigger impact in the world with their message. And I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross. Now, my guest today says, and I love this, your self-worth is not determined by your net worth, but your net worth is determined by your self-worth. And joining me on today's show is Alaina Schwartz. Now, at age 14, Alaina suffered a traumatic brain injury, and she was told that she would have permanent brain damage. And her mother, who didn't believe in the diagnosis, yay mum, retrained Alaina's brain for a full recovery. And today, that is called neuroplasticity. Then, after 18 years as an attorney and the EVP of the largest independent music company in the world, she lost everything, and her personal and professional life completely unraveled. And she became hyper-focused on rebuilding her life and rewiring her brain again for success and fulfillment. Now, Alaina has created multiple six-figure companies and a beautiful life since. And as a business and mindset coach, what she does is she focuses on foundations, on strategies and systems, and she uses those experience and her training to be the foundation of her work, specifically with women. Now, on today's show, Alaina's going to share with us having to work hard to succeed. That is the biggest myth in business, that your self-worth is not determined by your net worth. She'll dive deeper into that, as well as how to rewire your brain for successful outcomes. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. It's such an honor and a privilege to be here.
I love, that when I read the introduction about your mother, you're going to kind of say, I mean, how often are we told something or we hear something and we let that inhibit the actions that we take, the decisions that we make? And I love that. And of course, you've used the principles that helped retrain your brain as a young girl to as an adult. And I would imagine that now we're having the conversation at a time such as this. There are many people thinking that, I mean, there's challenges, of course, but what are some of the ways that we can do things differently? What is the hope? What is the possibility? What are the opportunities? And we often are limited by our understanding, our thinking. So we're certainly going to dive into that. Let's just dive in. Working hard, the myth, the biggest myth in business.
Yes.
Share some insights into this, Alaina.
Yeah, I really love that. And thank you. And by the way, going back to what you said in the first place, I didn't know, like my mother didn't tell me until much later on that that's what the neurologist said. And it's probably very fortunate that she didn't. So I didn't know that. And I think that makes a huge difference, right? Because once we hear something implanted in our, that's limiting in our belief system, it absolutely changes our perception. And that goes to the question that you asked, which, so many, I mean, didn't you learn growing up that you have to work really hard to succeed? Like if you want to do well, work really hard. And then there's, entrepreneurs like Elon Musk who touts that he works 120 hours a week. And if you want levels of success, you have to work that hard. And to be honest, it's total bullshit. Because when you move in flow, when you move out of the hustle mentality, when you move out of the stress response and into your parasympathetic nervous system, your brain then becomes coherent. And when your brain becomes coherent, both sides of your brain actually work together. This is total neuroscience. And when that happens, your brain acts as this amazing antenna that taps into unlimited intelligence. And you are so much able to access far beyond what you could in our limited brains. And it allows us to come up with creativity, inspiration, ideas, solutions that we could never have thought about before. And then the other part of that is that working really hard, like when we're like nose to the grindstone kind of working, then what happens is you are in that stress response and everything takes longer than it would if you were moving in a relaxed and calmer state. So this is just a bunch of BS that we've been taught, and so many people believe it that they drive themselves to continue to work that hard, even though it's really not true.
And something else that I'll often see happen, and I'm sure that you've seen this too, that is when we start to get stuck into the busyness tasks.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I need to be busy, and we're still spinning our wheels. But as you say, we're not working on the right activities. You mentioned something, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into this because I don't think people really are aware of what it means and what needs to be in place. And this is what you said, when they find their flow. Let's
Yeah.
talk about, how do we find our flow? What does it mean? And I'm sure it's different for everybody, bringing their own kind of their definition of what flow means for them. Share a little bit more about this.
Sure, sure. I'm sure that most people have felt the experience of when everything is just flowing right, when things just seem to be showing up and happening, and you just have like those days or maybe a week where everything just seems to be going right. And that's really a state of flow. Now, athletes will call that being in the zone, right? They can just tell when they're in the zone. And when they lock into the zone, they're just on. Like everything that happens just seems to be working out. And you can actually the interesting thing about that is that it's like a muscle that you can build and you can cultivate it. So you can build states of flow by getting out of hustle. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't moments where hustle is appropriate, but we can actually do things by changing our habits, by changing our thinking. And as a result of changing our thinking, it changes the way we feel. And when we start doing that and really focusing on good feelings and good thoughts, and it does move us into a place of flow where we tap in to, it's like the river going downstream instead of the river going upstream. And we're not swimming upstream anymore. Everything just seems to be showing up, and resources and synchronicities and opportunities just keep showing up. So one of the things I have my clients do, in addition to working on their limiting beliefs, which is a major part of it, is also to focus on practical habits that they do on a regular basis, because our habits are reflective of our thinking, of our beliefs, as well as our priorities. And so, for example, one of the things I'll have my clients do is stop checking your phone when you first wake up in the morning. It's like such a simple thing. But when we start to repeat the same patterns day in and day out, we have the same predictable days day in and day out. And if we want a different day, if we want to experience something different, then we actually have to act differently. And that starts for me with habits that makes it really simple. So for example, brushing your teeth, if you're right hand dominant, brushing your teeth with your left hand. If you wake up, you check your phone, you go to the bathroom, you probably check your phone in the bathroom, you go make coffee and shower, do things differently. Don't do it quite the same way. And then your brain starts going, what? Wait a minute. I want to do the same thing because I get those hit of chemicals that are addictive that have me doing the same stressful thing day in and day out. And when you shift that up, you start to shift neural patterns in your brain that allow for a different experience.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned about habits being so impactful because our habits will determine the outcome. And you mentioned about checking your phone, the first thing in the morning. I don't even have my phone. I don't bring that into the bedroom unless, of course, I have to have my alarm on. Otherwise, my husband's phone on the other side of the bed goes off. But what are some things that you see are real habits that we need to look at? And the reason I say that is so often we don't even realize that some of the things that we do, it may be as a normal course of our day, i.e. picking up the phone first thing when we wake up, could be inhibiting our ability to even get into flow. So what are some things that we need to be aware of that you've seen have been absolutely life-changing?
Social media, getting sucked into social media. That's a huge one. Phones are actually really addictive. I mean, Facebook has spent millions of dollars hiring, psychologists and MIT grads to get us addicted to devices. And it works. It really works. And so the idea is I only use social media, for example, for business. I really don't scroll through anymore. So one of the things that really is helpful is I see with a lot of my clients, they're majorly distracted, right? So we're in this almost, I call it like a microwave culture. We're accustomed to having things on demand really quickly. And so we get distracted. We have short attention spans. And so creating focus blocks, moving your habits to creating focus blocks, you can either work with your energy or you can work with the most important thing of the day first. I mean, there are many ways to actually, hack your day so that you're getting the most productivity, because what they actually find, which is crazy in studies, is that the average person who works 8 hours a day is only productive for 3.5 to 4 of those hours. So if you actually thought about working, say, 5 hours and being really productive 3.5 to 4 of those hours, like your life would radically shift. First of all, you'd probably get more and more productive and get more stuff done, but you'd also have a more fulfilling life in the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Beautiful. And so with those studies, it then begs, why are people working 10, 15 hours a day when only 3 or so of between 3 and 5 hours of that day is productive? A lot of that other time, I know for myself, I know when I'm starting to wear down, my adrenal glands go. I find it very hard to focus. And previously I would have pushed through that. But I've realized that no, take a break. Go and do something else. And when you come back, you're far more focused. So I love the way that you've shared that. So very important. It's almost like foundational, isn't it? We've got to be mindful about what we're doing. And then as we slowly unpack that and change some of those habits, we can then develop. And it's almost like, you get yourself in distraction. Oh, I'm in flow. Everything's working really well. And you can get so much done. When you say you can almost create that experience, does that take time to do? Like, and I'd imagine you need to be very mindful about what time of day you work best, what does distract you, so you can create an environment that, as soon as I do this, I've anchored myself to be able to straight away write, because there's nothing worse than blocking out time in your diary and you're sitting there staring at a blank page for an hour that you've blocked out. So what are some things that we can do to help us?
Yeah, I have a client, for example, who has this exact problem that you're talking about. And one of the things that we've worked on with her is we've looked at where her energy is during the day, where her flow is. And so in the morning, she's really distracted. When she starts to try to focus on work that takes a lot of attention, she really doesn't get anything accomplished till early afternoon. So we have her do all her client calls in the morning because that's easy for her to do. So she blocks out her morning for client calls and for sales calls. And in the afternoon, she focuses on, content and course creation and things that require more focus and attention from her. And she finds that when she does that, she actually gets a lot more done. And so she utilizes exactly what you said, Anne-Marie, that she utilizes her energy flow during the day to work. Now, I have other clients who don't notice such disparate energy, periods during the day. And so they may take the most important thing that they need to do and spend the first 90 minutes focused on the most important thing that they need to do. And then they get that out of the way, right? So they focus first thing in the morning, get that out of the way, and then they maybe take a break and maybe meditate or work out or something, and then focus again for another like 60 or 90-minute block. And they get a lot done in their time too. So it really is self-awareness about what really works for you in your day, because I can't say this is with my coaching overall. There is no one size fits all. There are principles that apply across the board, and then they apply individually to each person by becoming self-aware of what really works for you.
Yeah. And that's the biggest insight. There is no one size fits all. I mean, how many times have we gone to various trainings where we've tried to learn a new system, a productivity system, yet that productivity system, I know for me, because I love creative projects. And if I had to do all of this and this and this first, by the time I get to do the creativity bit, I'm already worn out. So it is, self-awareness is so very important. Let's talk about this topic. I think so many of us can relate to this. Our self-worth is not determined by our net worth, but our net worth is determined by our self-worth. What insights can you share here?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. So, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel during the day, like our feelings from a quantum physics perspective, our thoughts are the energy we broadcast out to the universe, and our feelings are what we magnetize back to us. So, based on how we feel, is what we're experiencing, our thoughts and our feelings, is what we're experiencing in our reality. Now, so when you're actually feeling good about yourself in particular, when you've got a lot of self-belief, when those limiting beliefs aren't getting in the way, when you're cultivating gratitude in your day, then actually most of my clients experience radical expansion of their net worth. But often I find go-getters, high achievers, whether it be them trying to prove themselves to their parents or prove themselves to themselves at a certain point, they just keep thinking, oh, if I just accomplish this, then I'll feel better about myself, or I'll feel a sense of fulfillment. And it never happens because we're looking for something external to make us feel better about ourselves. And it's an inside out job. So it's a matter of cultivating that fulfillment, cultivating that satisfaction internally first. And then we watch miraculous things occur in our outer environment. So, for example, if you really want to experience a sense of freedom, whether it be financial freedom or time freedom, you actually have to feel free first. It's not going to be that you're going to feel freedom when XYZ happens. That doesn't happen. When you cultivate a sense of inner freedom, then XYZ shows up. And so I see honestly, I'm guilty of this too, Anne-Marie, is like when my dad passed last 2019, I didn't realize, because this is the work I do, I didn't realize how much of my self-worth was still in trying to prove myself to my dad, and by accomplishing more and more and being more and more successful. And it's what I see across the board with so many high achievers. And it doesn't matter how much they've achieved. It doesn't matter if they have multiple 7-figure or 8-figure businesses. It's still what I experience.
And there's a almost not a relief, I can't think of the word, but when we realize that this is not something that we experience on our own, and it is until that point that we realize, these, and I was like that too in the career industry. It was certification after certification. I admired colleagues around me and thought, I'll feel ready. I'll be ready when I get that certification. And then they launched another one, and before long, there was a whole string. But it is so true. So what are some things, because I think this really beautifully aligns with the last piece that you want to talk about, is how to rewire our brain for successful incomes. How do we start looking at some of those unhelpful beliefs that are driving those unhelpful habits and behaviors? What are some ways that we can start to shift that, so that maybe we want to do a certification, maybe we want to, whatever it is, but it's not from a scarcity, I have to do that to feel good, but hey, I'm going to be able to contribute more to the clients around me and to my community. Let's look at a few insights here.
Yeah, well, you just raised a limiting belief that I see come up a lot, which is if I just have this certification, if I just do this, then I'll finally be ready to, and fill in the blank, right? That's a huge limiting belief I see. Another one that I see, with entrepreneurs in particular, is imposter syndrome. As entrepreneurs, we're not getting paychecks anymore. Our ability to provide for ourselves and our family and have the life we want is completely dependent on ourselves. And when that happens, particularly when people are aligned with their purpose and they're really putting this inner core, their gifts and talents out there, the imposter syndrome, the inner fraud comes up really big time. And so you can really look at what's happening in your life to help you determine what's the limiting belief that's controlling. And some of them, your subconscious mind, first of all, is 1,000,000 times more powerful than your conscious mind. And most of us are not aware of the beliefs that are going on in your subconscious mind. And they're actually controlling 95% of your life. So one of the things I really do recommend is get support, get help from somebody who understands how to navigate the subconscious mind and understands how to navigate limiting beliefs so that they can help you see what's really going on. Because, we really can't read the label from inside the jar. So it's really hard for us to tell for ourselves what's really going on and driving us unless you've done a ton of personal development work. So my recommendation is really get support in doing it to help you move through it, because even if you can identify it, like, for me, Mindset 101 that a lot of people do is really just identification of the limiting beliefs, but they don't really help people move through it in a way so that it no longer becomes an obstruction of their goals and their dreams.
And you can see that really manifesting itself within the workplace or in your business or in life, actually, in general, isn't it? When you are in a situation, you don't necessarily need to be contributing to a conversation, but be in earshot, and you hear something, and all of a sudden, when something triggers you because you feel it in the pit of your gut. And then all of a sudden, you've got that inner critic and that mind chatter going on. And I think now, because of what's happening with COVID and all of the restrictions and everything and so many more challenges, what's come to the forefront is a lot of this now. What am I telling myself? What am I allowing myself to listen to? Because if you surround yourself, and I think surroundings, your external environment and the people you associate can really impact your self-worth too, through what you're allowing yourself to hear and absorb. Would you say that that's fair?
It's fair in a certain extent. You touched on something that's super important, which your feelings being the barometer of what's really going on. So if you're not feeling good, then you're being triggered there. There's a limiting belief that's going on. And the truth is when you're solid in yourself, even if people are talking smack and, it wouldn't bother you. Right?
Yeah.
So when you're solid in yourself, it wouldn't bother you. So if it is bothering you, it's a really good indicator that there's a limiting belief going on that's coming up, and that's why it's bothering you in the first place. Because when people say things to us that we know aren't true, it just bounces off of us. It's kind of like Teflon. It just bounces off of us. We don't take it in. We only take it in when there's this inner part of ourselves, the subconscious mind, that believes that that's true in the first place. So that's a really good indicator, like, did that bother me? So when you're feeling bothered, then there's a limiting belief there that's really controlling what's going on and why you're feeling the way you are.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that you mentioned get support. Absolutely. Because, we may not necessarily be seeing things that are happening. And it's these patterns that obviously someone who's trained in this area can support. But for people, and we're going to share in a moment how people get in contact with you, but would just share a few insights, if you would, if someone can recognize there's certain things, what are there some basic principles that people can start to follow, just to even create almost a buffer, if you will, of support till they can go out and find someone to go, these are issues that are really coming up and they're inhibiting me from giving, expanding and giving even more to my community. But what are some things that we can do that almost create a buffer around us so that we don't constantly find ourselves in experiencing what we were just sharing? Can you share a few insights?
Absolutely. One of them is talked about a lot in the personal development space, but I can't overestimate or underestimate the importance of it, actually, which is gratitude. I have my clients, when you keep, for example, a gratitude journal and you list every day 10 things that you're grateful for, it's not just about listing it, it's about really feeling it. Because the way that the universe works, again, from a quantum physics perspective, is when you think about gratitude, you give gratitude for something that's already happened. And so when you give gratitude for things that you have in your life, then the more gratitude you have, not only do you actually feel better, but then more things like that will show up in your life. So actually cultivating an attitude of gratitude and carrying that throughout the day is really important because, for example, if you meditate, I recommend meditation too. But if you meditate and you do gratitude and you do this for like an hour in the morning, I teach my clients this thing called the power hour, where they do journaling, gratitude, meditation, etc. in the morning. But then the other 23 hours of the day, you go right back into your old patterns, then it's not really helpful. So what you have to do is carry those things with you throughout the day. So maybe it means stopping and taking a break when you start to not feel so great and going back into thinking of 3 things you're grateful for. And that's one thing. And then the other things that are really powerful is what I call like an evidence journal, of starting to keep evidence. We have these parts of our brain. It's called the reticular activating system that goes in search of whatever you believe. So it's why if you've ever gotten a new car, you start seeing that car everywhere on the road, right? And so what ends up happening is if you believe I'm not good enough, and you may not be conscious that you're believing that, but your reticular activating system will go in search of all the experiences and the people who prove to you that's true, even though the belief isn't really true in the first place. But if you're starting to have it focused on the things that you're grateful for, it will find more things to be grateful for. It will search more opportunities and experiences to be grateful for. And when you start keeping track of them, when you start keeping track of the evidence, then you send your reticular activating system in search of more of that. So those are just 2 really simple ways to do it, but you have to do it consistently. Because your brain, the wiring in your brain is like this path in a field of tall grass, right? So you're accustomed to walking this particular path every day, and it's well worn, and you decide you want to create a new path, which is what you really want to do. You want something different. And when you start to walk on the new path, if you only do it once, the grass bounces right back up. But if you do it over and over and over again consistently, and 66 days to create a new habit and wire it into your brain, then all of a sudden you have a different experience of life.
So true. As you were sharing those wonderful insights, I'm reminded of a situation where someone implemented that, and, through consistency, they really were able to change that. And one of the things that I have found to be true too is some, unhelpful beliefs that I have changed, and specifically, around identity. When things happen, you're able to recognize it and then shift it straight away. So it's never going to be an issue. You'll recognize it, but it doesn't become an issue because you go, you know what? I don't believe that anymore. That's just, you can brush that aside. And that's where I think it's so important to recognize. So I'm going to share my screen and bring up your website. And then as I do, share a little bit more about the work that you do, how people can get in contact with you, all of that good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So people can get in touch with me through my website, which is www.alainaschwartz.com, or they can reach out to me at support@alainaschwartz.com. And I hang out on LinkedIn quite a bit, which is how you and I met. So you'll see a lot of free content, a lot of podcasts that I offer. There's like a lot of great stuff out there. And I work with 6 to 7 plus figure entrepreneurs and leaders, and help them grow their impact and work significantly less. So, if you're looking to really scale, like I don't help people grow their business. I help them scale, which is actually different. So if you're really looking to scale impact and income and work less, then I'd love to have a conversation.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, that website, alainaschwartz.com, ALAINASCHWARTZ.com. We'll have all of the details in the show notes as well. So please connect with Alaina. And of course, Alaina, you said you're on LinkedIn, and follow her there, connect with her there, let her know that you are hearing and reaching out because you heard of her on the Women in Leadership. Alaina, as we're finishing up the show, you've just shared some beautiful insights that I know is going to be so helpful. We've only just scratched the surface. I mean, we could talk about this for the whole day, but what would be one final insight that you would love to leave with people today before we finish the show?
Yeah, it's what I would love to say is that so much more is possible for people than they actually realize. When we tap into universal intelligence, when we go beyond what our brain has the capacity, our brains are these amazing antennas. And when we can tap in to this larger experience, we can create so many miraculous things in our life, in our relationships, in our, careers and businesses, with our families. Like, so much is really possible. And I really want everybody to understand that, if you work through the stuff that's holding you back and you just open up to greater possibility, you can actually have an unbelievably extraordinary life. And my goal on this planet is to help people live extraordinary lives and be able to give their gifts and talents to the world in a much bigger way that creates a deep level of inner satisfaction and fulfillment and ability and capacity to enjoy their lives in a deeper way.
What a beautiful way to finish the show, Alaina. And thanks once again for coming on the show and sharing your insight.
I really appreciate it.
This podcast is brought to you by the influencealliance.com. Want to influence real change with your message by becoming known as a trusted authority in your industry while building a sustainable and scalable business you love? Find out how by accessing our free podcast series at www.theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series. That's theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series.